Father abandons him as a young boy. He adopts a bear cub and they grow up together, and his cabin becomes a paradise. Nathan Miller woke to the heavy silence that only mountain solitude can create. The cabin was cold, the fire had been out for hours, and for the first time in his 7 years of life there was no one there but him. On the rough wooden table lay a crumpled paper with the last words his father managed to leave. He went to the window and looked out, hoping to see the old truck parked in the yard as it always had been. Nothing. Just the wind swaying the pine trees and the distant sound of a creek flowing down the mountains. Nathan returned to the table, picked up the paper again, and tried to read the words he already knew by heart, even though he didn't fully understand what they meant. Son, I had to go find work in the city. I can't stay here anymore. The food ran out and I can't get any more. You're a big boy now, you'll know how to manage, sorry. There was no signature, no promise of return. There was nothing but those dry sentences that cut like a knife. The boy sat on the old plank floor and hugged his knees, trying to understand what had happened. His father had always been a tough man, of few words, but he never imagined he would just leave like that, without explanation, without a goodbye, without anything. Nathan looked around the cabin. There was a half-empty bag of flour, some shriveled potatoes, a can of beans, and nothing else. The cold of the mountains was increasing, and he knew that soon snow would begin to fall on the higher parts of the mountain. Daddy will come back, he said to himself, his thin voice echoing in the emptiness. He just went to get food, he'll be back. But deep down, something inside him already knew that wasn't true. The first days were the hardest. Nathan tried to keep a routine, waking up early as his father had taught him, checking the traps that had been set months ago near the creek. Most were broken or empty. He managed to catch a small rabbit on the third day, but he didn't quite know how to prepare it. He had seen his father do it dozens of times, but he never paid enough attention to the details. After burning half the meat and eating the other half too raw, Nathan spent the night with a stomachache, curled up on the only mattress in the cabin, covered with old blankets that smelled of mold and abandonment. By the second week, the loneliness began to weigh more than the hunger. Nathan talked to himself, pretended his father was there, that he would come back through the door at any moment. He made excuses for the absence. He invented stories that he had found an amazing job in the city and would soon send money, come get his son. But no one came. No one climbed that steep trail that took hours to travel. The cabin was in such a remote region of the mountains that even the closest neighbors were miles away. It was on a foggy morning, when Nathan went to fetch water from the creek, that everything changed. The sound was low, a faint whimper that was almost lost in the noise of the running water. Nathan stopped, sharpened his ears, and turned his head toward the sound. There, among the wet stones on the bank, something was moving. He approached slowly, still afraid of what he might find. When he got close enough, his heart almost stopped. It was a bear cub. It couldn't have been more than a few months old. Its brown fur was dirty with mud and blood. One of its hind legs seemed injured, and its small dark eyes looked at Nathan with a mix of fear and desperation. The animal tried to crawl away, but it had no strength. Nathan stood still, not knowing what to do. He had heard stories about bears in the region, dangerous animals that could kill a grown man with one swipe. But this wasn't an adult bear. It was a helpless baby, hurt and scared, and it was alone, just like him. The boy looked around, searching for signs of the cub's mother. Nothing. Only the silence of the forest and the sound of the water. He knew that bears didn't abandon their cubs without a reason. Either the mother had been scared away, or the cub had been rejected for being too weak. Nathan crouched down and slowly reached out his hand. The cub tried to growl, but the sound that came out was pathetic, weak. It was dying. If it stayed there, it wouldn't last another day. "You were left behind too, huh?" Nathan whispered softly, feeling the tears begin to fall. "Nobody wanted you." It was as if he were talking to himself. Carefully, Nathan wrapped the cub in his old jacket and lifted it into his arms. The animal was lighter than he expected, its bones almost visible beneath its matted fur. It whimpered softly but didn't try to attack. Maybe it was too weak, or maybe somehow it sensed that this boy was its last chance. Nathan climbed the trail back to the cabin with the cub in his arms, each step a decision. He didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't know if he could save that animal. But he knew he couldn't leave it there to be consumed by the cold and hunger. Inside the cabin, Nathan placed the cub near the fireplace and lit a small fire with the last few twigs he had. The animal was trembling, its whole body shaking from the cold and fever. Its hind leg was inflamed, with a deep cut that looked infected. Nathan remembered the times he had seen his father treat injured animals. Hunters from the region sometimes showed up asking for help when their dogs got hurt on the trails. His father never refused, even though he was a difficult man. He would clean the wounds with boiled water, use herbs he gathered in the woods, and make bandages with clean cloths. The boy ran to the small cabinet where his father kept a few things. He found a jar with dried herbs, a cloth that still seemed clean, and a small knife. He put water on to boil over the fire and waited, his heart beating fast as he watched the cub lying there and breathing with difficulty. When the water boiled, Nathan wet the cloth and waited for it to cool a bit. Then, with trembling hands, he began to clean the wound on the cub's leg. The animal grunted and tried to pull away, but it was too weak to resist. "Easy, easy," Nathan whispered softly, just as he had heard his father speak to animals. "It's going to hurt a little, but then it will get better." He didn't know if the cub understood, but he kept talking. It was better than silence. After cleaning the wound, Nathan took some of the herbs his father used and mashed them into a paste. He applied it to the cut, tied it with the cloth, and stayed there, sitting beside the cub, watching. The hours passed. The fire crackled softly. Nathan took what was left of the food and shared a piece of boiled potato with the animal. The cub sniffed it but didn't eat. It was too weak. That night, Nathan slept on the floor next to the cub, pulling the blankets over both of them. It was strange not to be completely alone. The warmth of the animal's body, however small, brought some comfort. The next day, the cub was still alive. That was already a miracle. Nathan woke to the sound of soft whimpers and found the animal trying to get up. Its leg was still bandaged, but it could bear a little weight on it. Its eyes, once dull, now had a different shine. "You're strong," Nathan said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "You're going to make it." In the days that followed, Nathan shared everything he had with the cub. When the food in the cabin ran out completely, he went out to look for whatever he could find in the forest. He gathered wild berries, dug for roots, tried to fish in the creek with an improvised rod. The first time he managed to catch a fish, he shouted with joy. It wasn't big, but it was food. He roasted half for himself and gave the other half raw to the cub, which devoured it hungrily. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The cub gradually recovered. The wound on its paw began to heal, and it could walk, though still limping. Nathan decided to give him a name. He thought of several, but none seemed right. Until one afternoon, watching how stubborn the animal was, and how it insisted on following Nathan everywhere, even with its injured paw, he decided. "You are stubborn. I'll call you Stubborn. No, that's too long." Nathan thought for a moment. "Buddy. I'll call you Buddy." The cub looked at him and gave a low grunt that could have meant anything, but Nathan chose to believe it was approval. The months passed in a difficult routine that created a deep bond between the boy and the animal. Buddy grew quickly, and so did Nathan. Constant hunger taught the boy to be creative. He watched the forest animals, saw where they looked for food, and imitated their habits. He learned that certain roots were edible, that some fruits that looked poisonous were actually nutritious, and that larger fish could be caught in the deeper parts of the creek if he used a trap instead of a rod. Buddy, in turn, began hunting small animals, rabbits mostly. At first, Nathan was afraid the bear might attack him too, but Buddy always brought his prey near the cabin and shared it with the boy. It was a strange relationship. Nathan knew that. But it worked. The first winter was brutal. Snow covered the mountain, and the temperature dropped so low that Nathan woke up with numb fingers even sleeping near the fire. Buddy had grown enough to generate significant body heat, and on the coldest nights, Nathan slept leaning against the bear, using him as a living blanket. Food became scarce. The animals hid, the fruits disappeared under the snow, and fishing became almost impossible with the creek partially frozen. There were days when Nathan and Buddy went hungry, days when the boy wondered if he should go down the mountain and seek help. But whenever he thought about it, he remembered his father's note, the cold words, the abandonment, and a dull anger grew in his chest. No, he would survive. He would prove he could, that he didn't need anyone, that he could be stronger than that man who left him behind. When spring finally arrived, Nathan was 8 years old and Buddy was the size of a large dog. The relationship between them had transformed into something unique. Nathan talked to the bear as if he were human, told stories, shared his fears and hopes. Buddy responded in his own way, with grunts, low growls, and a loyalty Nathan had never experienced before. It was around this time that Nathan began renovating the cabin. The wood was rotting, the roof leaked, and several floorboards were loose. He didn't have proper tools, but he had time and determination. In the following months, Nathan started collecting fallen branches, wood from dead trees, and stones from the creek. He observed how animals built their dens, how birds made nests, and tried to apply those principles to rebuilding the cabin. Buddy helped in his own way, dragging large logs that Nathan could never move alone, chasing away dangerous animals that approached the property, standing guard while the boy worked. The cabin was slowly transformed. Nathan covered the holes in the roof with large leaves and mud, reinforced the walls with stones and interwoven branches, and created a kind of porch in front, where he could sit and watch the forest. It wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect, but it was his and Buddy's. The years continued to pass. Nathan learned to make more sophisticated traps, to preserve food for the winter, to recognize the signs of changing weather. Buddy grew to the size of an adult bear, but never lost the gentleness he had with Nathan. To the rest of the world it would be incomprehensible, a wild bear living in harmony with a human, but to the two of them it made perfect sense. They had been abandoned, rejected, and in each other they found the family the world had denied them. When Nathan turned 12, something inside him began to change. He was no longer that frightened boy who woke up alone in the cabin. He was taller, stronger, more confident. Life in the mountain had forged in him a resilience that few possessed. But there was also a deep loneliness. As much as he loved Buddy, as much as his life there had purpose, Nathan missed human conversations, laughter, stories, belonging to something bigger than just him and the bear. It was on a summer afternoon that everything began to change again. Nathan was hunting near the property boundaries when he heard voices. Human voices. He hid behind a tree, his heart beating fast. Buddy, who was nearby, sensed the tension and approached silently. There were 3 men. They carried shotguns, machetes, and large backpacks. Hunters. Nathan heard when they started talking. "There are fresh bear tracks around here," said one of them, a fat man with a sparse beard. "And big. Must be worth a fortune." "Are you sure it's legal to hunt here?" asked another, younger, with a nervous expression. "Legal?" the first one laughed. "No one comes here. It's no man's land, and even if it weren't, who's going to know?" Nathan felt his blood run cold. They were hunting Buddy. They were hunting his friend, his family, for money. He looked at the bear beside him. Buddy was still, tense, sniffing the air. Nathan put his hand on the animal's fur and whispered, "Easy. We're going back to the cabin slowly." They began to retreat, but a branch snapped under Nathan's foot. The sound echoed in the silent forest. What was that? The third man raised his shotgun. Nathan didn't wait. He ran. Buddy ran by his side, the two moving with a synchronicity that only years of living together could create. They heard shouts behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps. "There's someone here," one of the men yelled. "And a bear, get them!" Nathan knew the forest better than anyone. Every trail, every shortcut, every hiding place. He led Buddy along a steep path he knew the men would have trouble following, then cut through a dense patch of vegetation that led directly to the cabin. When they arrived, Nathan was panting, panic still throbbing in his veins. He locked the cabin door, grabbed the old hunting knife his father had left, and stood there waiting. The men didn't show up that night. Oh, but Nathan knew they would return, and when they did, it would be worse. Over the following days, Nathan set traps around the property. They weren't traps to kill, he didn't want to cause unnecessary suffering, but traps to alert him. Ropes with tied cans, branches arranged to make noise if stepped on, stacked stones that would fall with any movement. Buddy seemed to sense the tension in the air. He became more alert, growled at any strange sound, patrolled the cabin surroundings like a guardian. Nathan, in turn, could hardly sleep. Every noise from the forest made him jump. Every shadow was a threat. He spent 2 weeks like this, in constant vigilance. And then, finally, he relaxed. Maybe the hunters had given up. Maybe they had found other prey. Maybe. It was in the early morning that the trap started making noise. Nathan woke up to the sound of cans clattering. He jumped from the mattress, grabbed the knife, and left the cabin. Buddy was already outside, standing on his hind legs, growling loudly into the forest's darkness. "Who's there?" Nathan shouted, trying to sound braver than he actually felt. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, then another, and another. It wasn't 3 men. There were more, many more. "Get out of the way, kid," the fat man's voice echoed. "We don't want to hurt you. We just want the bear." "He's not yours," Nathan shouted back, stepping between Buddy and the hunters. "Get out of here! That animal is worth more money than you'll ever see in your whole life," another man said, "and we're taking him, with or without your permission." Buddy roared. It wasn't the low grunt Nathan knew. It was a real deep roar that made the ground shake. The bear slammed his paws on the ground, muscles tense, ready to attack. The men hesitated. Even armed, a furious adult bear was a frightening thing. "Back off," Nathan said, his voice firm now. "Buddy might seem gentle with me, but if you try to take him, he will defend himself. And you'll get hurt a lot worse than he will." It was a risky bet. Nathan didn't know if Buddy would actually attack the men. He had never seen the bear in a situation like this. But he had to bluff. He had to appear confident. One of the hunters stepped forward. Buddy roared again, this time advancing a few steps. The man quickly retreated, stumbling over his own legs. "This isn't over, kid," the group's leader said, slowly backing away. "We'll be back, and next time we'll bring more people. You can't protect this animal forever." They disappeared into the forest's darkness, the flashlights becoming smaller and smaller dots until they vanished completely. Nathan collapsed to the ground, his legs shaking. Buddy approached and nudged his snout against the boy's shoulder, as if wanting to comfort him. "What are we going to do, Buddy?" Nathan whispered, hugging the bear's neck. "They'll be back. And they'll bring more people. We can't fight all of them." The bear just stood there, his warm, familiar weight bringing some comfort. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out now, continuing. Nathan stayed awake all night, thinking. He was 13 now, almost 14. He had lived there for almost 7 years, 7 years alone with Buddy. But he knew he couldn't go on like this forever. The hunters would return, and even if he managed to drive them away this time, they would come back. Again and again. He needed help. But from whom? He didn't know anyone. His father had left, probably in some big city with a new life, without looking back. Nathan had never gone down the mountain since he was abandoned. He didn't even know if there was still a village down there, if people would remember his father, if anyone would care. But he had no choice. When the sun rose, Nathan made a decision. He was going down the mountain. He was going to look for help. Even if it meant facing a world he no longer knew, even if it meant exposing Buddy's existence, it was better than waiting for the hunters to return with greater force. He packed a backpack with a few things, left Buddy in the cabin with enough food, and began the descent. The trail was steep and treacherous. Nathan hadn't gone down there since he was a child, and a lot had changed. Fallen trees blocked paths, rocks had rolled down, creating new obstacles. It took hours until he spotted smoke on the horizon, a sign that there were people there. When he finally reached what seemed to be a small village, Nathan hesitated. It was just a few houses, a general store, a small church. Nothing too different from his memories, but at the same time, everything seemed strange. The people seemed strange. The sound of human voices after so long was almost disconcerting. He entered the store with trembling hands. There was a woman behind the counter with graying hair and a tired face. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking at Nathan with suspicion. Nathan didn't know where to begin. "I need help. There are hunters. They want to take my bear." The woman raised her eyebrows. "Your bear?" "It's a long story," Nathan said, feeling the words tumble out. "I live up there, in the mountain, alone, with the bear, ever since my father left, and now there are hunters trying to catch him and I don't know what to do." The woman stayed silent for a moment, studying Nathan. He must have looked wild, with worn-out clothes, messy hair, skin tanned by the sun, but there was something in his eyes, a desperate sincerity that made her believe. "How old are you?" she asked gently. 13, almost 14. "And you've been living alone up there since when?" "Since I was 7. The woman's expression changed to something between shock and compassion. "Your father, is he Miller, the man who lived in that old cabin?" Nathan nodded. "He left me there." The woman sighed heavily and came out from behind the counter. "My name is Mrs. Wilson. I knew your father. He used to buy supplies here sometimes." She paused. "He was never an easy man. But I didn't know he had left a son up there alone." "No one knew," Nathan said quietly. "He never talked about me." Mrs. Wilson put her hand on the boy's shoulder. "Come, let's talk properly. And you need to eat something real." She prepared a plate of food for Nathan, who ate with a hunger he didn't know he had. While he ate, he told his story. Mrs. Wilson listened in silence, sometimes shaking her head, sometimes with tears in her eyes. "And these hunters, do they come back?" she asked when Nathan finished. "They'll be back. They said they're bringing more people." Mrs. Wilson thought for a moment. "Illegal hunting is a crime. There's a law protecting animals. But here, far from everything, those laws don't mean much. No one enforces them." She paused. "But maybe I know someone who can help." She took Nathan to the house next to the store where she lived. There she wrote some letters, which she would send with travelers passing through the village. One was for regional authorities reporting the illegal hunting. Another was for a lawyer she knew in the nearest town, explaining Nathan's situation. "It will take time," she said honestly. "These things always take time, but it's a start." Nathan thanked her, but he knew he didn't have much time. He needed to get back to Buddy. He needed to make sure the bear was safe. Mrs. Wilson packed a backpack with supplies, more than Nathan had seen in years. "I'll start going up the mountain once a month," she said. "To bring supplies, check on how you are. You shouldn't be alone up there. Not at your age." "I'm not alone," Nathan said, a small smile on his face. "I have Buddy." "Even so," she insisted, "I'll visit you. And when the letters are answered, we'll sort out this hunter situation." Nathan went back to the mountain with a lighter heart. He had found someone who cared, someone who didn't judge him for living with a bear, but understood that sometimes family isn't who shares your blood, but who shares your life. When he reached the cabin, Buddy greeted him with happy grunts, rubbing his snout against the boy like a giant dog. Nathan laughed, hugging the bear. "We're going to be okay," he said. "Everything will work out, but things don't always go as planned." The hunters came back 3 days later, and this time there were more than 10 of them. Nathan heard the noise of the traps before dawn even broke. He jumped out of bed, grabbed Buddy, and tried to lead him into the cabin, but the men arrived too quickly. "No use hiding, kid," the leader's voice echoed. "We know you went to the village. We know you talked to old Helen. But it doesn't change anything. That bear is worth money, and we're taking it." Nathan stepped out of the cabin, knife in hand, even though he knew it was useless against so many armed men. "You're not going to touch him," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. The leader laughed. "You've got guts, kid, but you're just a boy. Step aside." Buddy growled, taking a few steps forward. The men raised their shotguns. "One more step and we shoot," one of them said. That's when another voice cut through the tension. "Lower your weapons, now." Everyone turned. It was Mrs. Wilson, and she wasn't alone. There were more than 20 people with her. village residents, men, women, even some elderly. No one was armed, but there were many of them. "What are you doing here?" the leader of the hunters asked, confused. "Protecting the boy," Mrs. Wilson said firmly, "and the bear. You have no right to be here. This land belongs to the boy's father, and by extension to him. You're trespassing on private property and trying to hunt illegally." "Private property?" the leader laughed. "This is no man's land." "It is not," Mrs. Wilson showed some papers. "I got the documents. This land was registered decades ago, and it still belongs to the Miller family. You don't have permission to be here." The hunters exchanged uncertain looks. They hadn't expected that. "Besides," Mrs. Wilson continued, "I've already sent letters to the regional authorities reporting you. There are enough witnesses here to confirm that you tried to hunt illegally, trespass, and threaten a minor." The word minor made several of the hunters hesitate. Threatening a child was something even criminals avoided when there were witnesses. "You can leave now, or you can stay and explain your actions when the authorities arrive," Mrs. Wilson said. "The choice is yours." There was a long moment of silence. The leader of the hunters gritted his teeth, looked at Buddy, at Nathan, at the crowd that had climbed the mountain. "This isn't over," he finally said. "But we're leaving. For now." They went down the mountain, defeated and angry. Nathan let out a sigh of relief so deep his legs almost gave way. Mrs. Wilson approached, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" Nathan nodded, unable to speak. He looked at the village residents, people he didn't know, who had hiked up hours of trail to help him. "Why?" he managed to ask finally. "Why did you do this?" An older woman with completely white hair stepped forward. "Because no one deserves to be abandoned," she said gently. "And because what you did, taking care of a wounded animal, surviving alone, building a life here, that deserves to be protected." "Besides," a younger man added with a smile, "the story of a boy who grew up with a bear on the mountain is the most amazing thing we've ever heard. We weren't going to let some greedy hunters destroy that." Nathan felt the tears finally fall. Years of loneliness, of fear, of having to be strong alone, all came to the surface. Mrs. Wilson hugged him, and for the first time since his father abandoned him, Nathan felt that maybe the world wasn't so cruel after all. After everyone had gone down, Nathan and Mrs. Wilson stayed talking. "I'll keep my promise," she said. "I'll come up once a month, bring supplies, see how you're doing, and I'll keep working on the property papers, making sure it's officially in your name when you turn 18. "Mrs. Wilson," Nathan said hesitantly, "I wanted to know about my father." "You said you knew him." The woman sighed. "I did. Your father, Michael Miller, was a difficult man, drank a lot, had problems, but I never imagined he was capable of abandoning a son." "Did he start another family?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking. Did he leave because he didn't want me?" Mrs. Wilson was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know if he started another family, but I know he went to the big city looking for work. A few months later, someone who knew him said they saw him there, working in a factory." She paused. "Whether he built a new life, I don't know. But what I do know is that he never came back here. He never asked about you. And that says a lot about the kind of man he was." Nathan felt a deep pain in his chest, but also a strange sense of relief. It was better to know the truth, no matter how painful, than to live in uncertainty. "He doesn't deserve your tears, Nathan," Mrs. Wilson said gently. "You built a life here, on your own, with a bear you saved. You have more strength and courage than he ever had." "Sometimes I wonder if it was me," Nathan confessed. "If I did something wrong. If that's why he left." "No," Mrs. Wilson was firm. "When an adult abandons a child, the fault is always theirs, always. You did nothing wrong. Your father just couldn't be the father he should have been." Those words stayed with Nathan over the following years. He was 14, then 15, then 16. Mrs. Wilson kept her promise, climbing the mountain every month. Sometimes alone, sometimes with other villagers who were fascinated by the story of the boy and the bear. Buddy grew to his full size. He was a huge bear with dark brown fur and intelligent eyes. To visitors, he was scary. To Nathan, he was family. The cabin continued to be renovated. With the tools and materials Mrs. Wilson started bringing, Nathan managed to make real improvements. He fixed the roof properly, reinforced the walls, created interior partitions for more space. He built a kind of large enclosure where Buddy could stay when there were visitors, not as a prison, but as a safe area. It was at 17 that Nathan had an idea. Mrs. Wilson was visiting as she did every month, and commented on how more and more people in the village were asking about him and Buddy. "Some people wanted to come up here just to see," she said. "Of course, I always say no, that you need your privacy. But the curiosity is strong." Nathan thought about that. Then he asked, What if I let people come up? In an organized way. Not many at once. But what if it became a kind of tour?" Mrs. Wilson looked at him surprised. "Are you serious?" "I am," Nathan said. "I've thought a lot about it. I can't live isolated here forever. And if people want to come, why not? I can show them what it's like to live here. Talk about the forest, about preservation, about Buddy. Maybe even charge a little to help with supplies and improvements to the cabin." It was a risky idea, but it was also an opportunity. Mrs. Wilson took the proposal to the village. The response was enthusiastic. Within a few weeks, there was a list of people wanting to take the Bear Tour, as it began to be called. Nathan set clear rules. Small groups, no more than 5 people. Everyone had to keep their distance from Buddy. They couldn't feed him or try to touch him. The tour included a walk through the forest, a visit to the cabin, and a period where Nathan told his story and talked about environmental conservation. The first group went up on a spring morning. Nathan was nervous. He hadn't spoken to more than one person at a time since he was a child. But when he started telling his story, the words flowed naturally. People were fascinated, not just by the story of abandonment and survival, but by the clear bond between Nathan and Buddy. The bear, which could be dangerous, was gentle around Nathan, responded when called, even showed affection in ways that seemed impossible for a wild animal. Money started coming in. Not a lot, but enough for Nathan to buy more tools, better materials for the cabin, new clothes. For the first time in years, he wasn't hungry. He didn't have to worry about having food for the winter. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The news spread beyond the village. Regional newspapers published stories about the boy who grew up with a bear. Some people traveled for hours just to take the tour. Nathan had to set up a scheduling system, limiting the tours to avoid overwhelming both himself and Buddy. With the money, and with the help of some visitors who volunteered, Nathan expanded the cabin. He built small rustic accommodations around the property. They were simple, just a place to sleep and shelter from the cold, but they allowed visitors to stay for more than a day, truly experiencing what it was like to live in the mountain. The property was transformed. What was once an abandoned, decaying cabin had become a mountain refuge. Nathan planted a vegetable garden, created a rainwater collection system, and even installed small solar panels that a visiting engineer helped him set up. He was 18 years old now. He was no longer the frightened boy who was left behind. He was a strong young man, his body defined by constant work, his skin tanned by the mountain sun, eyes that had seen more than many see in an entire lifetime. And just when everything seemed to finally be working out, the past returned. It was an ordinary afternoon. Nathan was organizing firewood when Buddy started to growl. It wasn't the growl he used to scare off wild animals. It was different, more tense. Nathan turned and saw a man coming up the trail. His heart stopped. It was his father. Michael Miller was older, thinner, his face marked by time and what seemed to be a hard life. But it was him, without a doubt. Nathan stood still, unable to move, as the man slowly approached. Buddy kept growling, positioning himself between Nathan and the stranger. "Nathan," Michael's voice was hesitant. You are Nathan?" Nathan didn't answer. He couldn't. 11 years. 11 years since this man abandoned him. since he left a 7-year-old boy alone to die, because that's exactly what he did. I saw the stories, Michael continued, taking a few more steps. In the newspapers, about you and the bear. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it couldn't be you, but then I saw the pictures and... Stop! Nathan finally found his voice. It was cold, hard. Don't come any closer. Michael stopped. He looked at Buddy, at the transformed property, at the son he barely recognized. You've grown, he said uselessly. You left, Nathan replied, each word heavy. You left me here, alone. I was 7 years old. I know, Michael lowered his head. I know, it was the worst thing I've ever done. But I had no choice. I had no money, no food, no... You had a choice, Nathan interrupted. You chose to leave. You chose to abandon me. You chose not to come back for 11 years. I was going to come back, Michael tried. I swear I was. But time passed and I couldn't. I was ashamed, afraid. I thought you were better off without me. Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Better off without you? I was starving. I almost froze to death the first winter. I had to learn to hunt, fish, survive all by myself. I was 7 years old. I know, You don't know, Nathan shouted, years of pent-up anger finally exploding. You have no idea what I went through. The fear, the loneliness, waking up every day hoping you'd come back and realizing you never would. Michael had tears in his eyes now. I'm sorry. I know it means nothing after all this time, but I'm sorry. I was a coward, a terrible father. You deserved better. I did, Nathan agreed. I deserved a father who stayed, who fought. That she would choose me, but that's not what I got. There was a long silence. Buddy remained between the two of them, tense and protective. What do you want? Nathan asked finally. Why did you come here? Michael wiped his eyes. I saw in the reports what you built, alone. I saw that you made it, and I wanted to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I know I have no right, but I needed to at least try. Forgiveness, Nathan repeated the word as if it were poison. You want forgiveness. I don't expect you to forgive me, Michael said quickly. I just wanted you to know that I regret it. Every day. What I did. What I didn't do. Nathan looked at the man who was his father. He tried to feel something beyond anger. He tried to find some remnant of the love a child has for their parents. But all he could feel was emptiness. Did you start another family? He asked. Michael hesitated, then nodded. I have a wife. 2 children. The words were like a stab wound. Nathan had half-siblings, children who had what he never had, a present father. Do they know about me? No, Michael admitted, ashamed. I never told them. Of course not. It was easier that way. Pretend the son abandoned in the mountain didn't exist. Start from scratch. Be the father I never was. Go away, Nathan said, his voice tired now. You have no place here. Nathan, please. Go away, Nathan shouted. You lost the right to call me your son when you left me alone to die. I'm nothing of yours. You are nothing of mine. The only family I have is that bear over there, and he's been more of a father to me than you ever were. Michael stood still for a moment, the tears flowing freely now. Then, slowly, he began to back away. I'll go, he said. But if you change your mind, if you ever want to talk... I won't, Nathan cut him off. I never will. Michael nodded, defeated, and began to descend the trail. Nathan stood there watching until the figure disappeared among the trees. Then his legs gave way. He collapsed to the ground, the entire emotional weight of the confrontation crushing him. Buddy approached immediately, pressing his large snout against Nathan, making low sounds of concern. I'm okay, Nathan said, hugging the bear's neck. I'm okay, Buddy. But he wasn't. That encounter had reopened wounds he thought had healed. All the anger, the pain, the abandonment, everything came back with full force. That night, Nathan could barely sleep. He kept thinking about his father, the new family, the half-siblings he would never know. He thought about how different it would be if Michael had stayed, if he had been the father he should have been. But he also thought about everything he had built, the life he had now, the people who had helped him, about Buddy, who never abandoned him, who was by his side in every difficult moment. In the morning, when the sun rose over the mountain, Nathan made a decision. He wouldn't let the past destroy the present. He wouldn't let bitterness consume the peace he had won. Mrs. Wilson came up a few days later, and he told her about his father's visit. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "Anger, sadness, relief, all at the same time." "It's normal," she said. "These things aren't simple. There's no right way to feel." "Part of me wanted to shout more," Nathan confessed. "Wanted to make him feel everything I felt, but another part just wanted him to go away. To leave my life in peace." "And what do you want to do now?" Nathan looked at the property around him, at the cabin that had been his hell and then his home, at Buddy sleeping in the sun. "I want to continue, move forward, not let him have power over my life. He already took so much from me. I won't let him take any more." Mrs. Wilson smiled, proud. "You're amazing, you know that? Amazing you. Stronger and more mature than many adults I know." The days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. Life went on. The tours continued. The property kept growing. It was on a fall day, 6 months after Michael's visit, that he returned. Nathan was fixing a fence when he saw the figure coming up the trail. His first instinct was to send the man away again, but there was something different this time. Michael wasn't alone. He brought tools, materials, as if... "What are you doing here?" Nathan asked as the man approached. "I know you told me not to come back," Michael began, his voice careful. "And I respect that. But I wanted to offer something, not as a way to make up for what I did, because I know nothing will make up for it, but as a way to show that my regret is real." "Show how?" Michael gestured to the materials he had brought. "By working, helping. Not as a father, because I know I lost that right, but as a worker, someone who can help with construction, with repairs. I don't need payment. I don't even need you to talk to me if you don't want to. Just let me do something useful." Nathan fell silent, processing. It was a strange offer, and part of him wanted to refuse, to send the man away again. But another part, a part he didn't want to admit, was tired of carrying so much hatred. "Why?" he asked. "Why now? Why really?" Michael sighed heavily. "Because in the last few months, since I came here, I can't sleep. I can't live with what I did. My wife noticed. She made me tell her. About you. And when I told her, when she found out I had a son, I abandoned..." He paused, his voice breaking. "She called me a monster, and she was right. My other children now know they have an older brother, and they were horrified by what I did." Nathan felt something strange hearing that. His half-siblings knew about him now, and they didn't judge him. They judged their father. "My family is destroyed," Michael continued, "because of my choices, my cowardice, and I deserve it. But I don't want it to be in vain. I don't want the rest of my life to be only about what I destroyed. I want to at least try to fix something." "You can't fix the past," Nathan said. "I know, but I can work in the present. I can help build what you're doing here. Not for me, for you. Because you deserve all the success in the world, and if I can contribute to that, even minimally, then at least I did something right in my miserable life." Nathan looked at the man. He saw the sincerity there, but he also saw the destruction Michael had caused, not only to him, but to his own life. "If I let you stay," Nathan said slowly, "it won't be as father and son. You'll be just another worker. You won't have privileges. You won't have closeness. And if I tell you to leave at any moment, you will. No discussion." "I accept," Michael said immediately. "Any terms you want. And Buddy," Nathan added, "he doesn't like you. If he growls, you back off. If he charges, you leave the property. Understood?" "Understood." Nathan took a deep breath. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing, but maybe, just maybe, giving the man a chance to prove his regret with actions was better than sending him away and carrying the hatred forever. "There's a shed over there that needs a new roof," Nathan said, pointing. "You can start there." Michael nodded, picked up his tools and headed there without saying another word. In the following days, Michael worked, and he worked hard. He fixed the shed, then helped with one of the accommodations that needed repairs, then reinforced fences, organized materials, did everything Nathan asked without complaining. They barely spoke. Nathan gave instructions, Michael followed them. It was a professional, cold, distant relationship, but it worked. Buddy remained suspicious. Whenever Michael got too close to Nathan, the bear growled. Michael learned to keep his distance, always working with Buddy in his line of sight, showing he wasn't a threat. Mrs. Wilson visited and was shocked to see Michael there. "What is he doing here?" she asked Nathan, away from the man. "Working," Nathan replied, "trying to show his remorse is real." "And you believe that?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted, "but I'm giving him the chance to try. Not for him, for me, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying hate." Mrs. Wilson looked at him with admiration. "You're wiser than you have any right to be at your age." The months passed. Michael kept working. He built a small cabin for himself, away from the main one where he slept. He asked for nothing more than basic food and permission to stay. He worked from dawn till dusk, sweating under the sun, freezing in the cold. And slowly, very slowly, things began to change. It wasn't a quick process, it wasn't dramatic, but gradually Nathan started noticing small things. The way Michael fixed things carefully, making sure they would last. How he organized the materials so Nathan could find them easily. How sometimes when he thought no one was looking, he would glance at Nathan with an expression of mixed pride and sadness. One night, after a particularly tough day of work, Nathan found himself sitting near the campfire with Michael across from him. Buddy was lying next to Nathan, as always, but he wasn't growling. "Thank you," Nathan said suddenly. Michael looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For the work, for the help. You've done a lot here. Much more than I could have done alone." Michael was silent for a moment. "It's the least," he finally said. "It's nowhere near enough, but it's the least I can do." "Why did you really leave?" Nathan asked. The question he had held on to for 11 years. The truth, it wasn't just about money and food. Michael looked into the fire, the flames dancing in his tired eyes. "I was scared," he admitted. "Your mother had passed away when you were a baby. I didn't know how to be a father alone. I didn't know how to raise a son. And the more you grew, the more I saw her in you, and it hurt. It hurt so much that I couldn't look at you without remembering her, without feeling the loss." Nathan listened in silence, processing. "So I drank," Michael continued, "to not feel. And the more I drank, the worse it got. Until one day, I woke up and realized I had nothing left. No money, no food, no hope. And I thought maybe you'd be better off without me. That I was just messing up your life." "You were," Nathan said honestly, "but abandoning me was worse." "I know." Michael wiped away tears that had started to fall. "I know. And I'll carry that until I die. But I want you to know it wasn't anything you did. You were a perfect child. The problem was always me. My weakness. My cowardice." It was the most honest thing Michael had said since he came back. And Nathan felt something inside him shift. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding. The understanding that his father was just a broken, weak man who made the worst possible decision at the worst possible time. "You won't get rid of the guilt," Nathan said. "Never. What you did was terrible, and there are no excuses." "I know. But," Nathan continued, "if you really want to try to fix something, keep working, keep helping, and maybe, with a lot of time, we can build something new. Not father and son, you destroyed that, but maybe work partners who share some history." Michael nodded, unable to speak. It was more than he deserved, and he knew it. The years kept passing. Nathan was 19, then 20. The property kept growing steadily. The rustic accommodations had become cozy small cabins. The tour business expanded to include workshops on survival, environmental conservation, and connecting with nature. People came from everywhere, not just to see the bear, but to experience that unique lifestyle, to hear the story of resilience, to learn from Nathan. And Michael was there, always in the background, always working, never asking for recognition. Over time, Nathan started talking to him more. Not deep conversations, not emotional sharing, but exchanges about work, about necessary improvements, about future plans. Buddy eventually stopped growling at Michael. He never approached the man, never showed affection, but he tolerated his presence. It was, in Nathan's opinion, more than Michael deserved, but less than he clearly wanted. It was when Nathan was 21 that he received an unexpected visit. Two young people, a boy and a girl, came up the trail. They weren't regular visitors. They seemed nervous, uncertain. "Can we help you?" Nathan asked as they approached. Are you Nathan?" the boy asked. He must have been about 16, with dark hair and eyes that seemed familiar. "I am," Nathan confirmed. "And you are?" "I'm Josh," the boy said, "and this is Melissa. We're your siblings." Nathan felt the ground disappear beneath his feet, his half-siblings. The children Michael had with the other family. They were there, in front of him. "How did you—" he began, but couldn't finish. "Our father," Melissa said, her voice soft. "He told us about you, 2 years ago. And since then we wanted to meet you, but we didn't know if you'd want to, if you'd hate us." "I don't—" Nathan stopped, trying to process it. "I don't hate you. You didn't do anything." "But our father did," Josh said, his voice full of shame. "What he did to you is unforgivable." "He's here, isn't he?" Melissa asked. "Working. He told us you let him stay." Nathan nodded. "I did. I don't know if it was the right thing, but I did." "Why?" Josh asked, genuinely curious. After all he did, why give him that chance? Nathan thought about the question. "Because carrying hate is heavy," he said finally. "And because, even though he doesn't deserve it, people sometimes need a chance to try to be better. It doesn't mean I've forgotten. It doesn't mean I've completely forgiven, but it means I chose not to let the past control my present." Melissa had tears in her eyes. "You're amazing," she said. "Seriously. After all you've been through, to be able to think like that." "I'm not perfect," Nathan said quickly. "There are days I still get angry. There are days I want to send him away. But I'm trying." "We wanted to say," Josh began, "that we're sorry. For what our father did, for the childhood you lost, for us having what you didn't have." "It wasn't your fault," Nathan said firmly. "You were kids. You had no control over his choices." "Even so," Melissa insisted, "we wanted you to know that if you want, we'd like to get to know you better, to have you as a brother, for real." Nathan looked at the two young people in front of him. They were just children when he was abandoned. They had nothing to do with their father's decisions, and there was something in them, a sincerity, that touched him. "I'd like that," he said, surprised by his own words. "Yes, I would." The smile that lit up their faces was worth everything. They spent the day on the property. Nathan showed them everything, introduced Buddy, who was surprisingly gentle with them, told his story. Josh and Melissa listened intently, sometimes with tears, sometimes with indignation at what Nathan had been through. When Michael appeared for lunch, he froze upon seeing his children there. "What are you doing here?" he asked, worried. "Knowing our brother," Josh said simply. Michael looked at Nathan as if expecting anger, but Nathan just shrugged. They came on their own and they're welcome. It was the beginning of something new. Josh and Melissa began visiting regularly. They brought their mother, Susan, who cried upon meeting Nathan and apologized profusely for not having known before, for not having done something. "You didn't know," Nathan told her, "and even if you had, It wasn't your responsibility to fix his mistakes. Susan was a good, kind woman who clearly loved her children and was devastated by what Michael had done. She offered financial help, support, anything Nathan needed. Nathan politely refused. "I built all this on my own," he explained, "and with help from the right people. I don't need money, but thank you for the offer." What he didn't refuse was the family. Slowly, through Josh and Melissa, Nathan began to understand what he had lost. The family dynamic, the laughter, the silly arguments, the unconditional support. It wasn't easy. Sometimes seeing what they had hurt, it reminded him of what he never had. But other times, simply being near them, hearing their stories, being part of their lives, was healing. The property continued growing. At 23, Nathan had completely transformed the area. What was once just an isolated cabin was now a small ecological sanctuary. There were marked trails, educational signs about the local flora and fauna, organized camping areas, a composting system, even a small library with books about nature and conservation. Buddy was old now. His movements were slower, his joints ached on cold days. But he was still imposing, still protective, still family. Nathan hired helpers to manage the tours when he couldn't. Mrs. Wilson, now in her mid-70s, still climbed the mountain regularly, more as a friend than a helper. Michael continued working. His hair was whiter, his hands more calloused. He never asked for more than he had. He never tried to force a closer relationship with Nathan. He was simply there working, trying every day to be a little less unworthy. And on a specific day when Nathan was 24, something changed for good. They were working together on a new structure when Nathan said, "Thank you." Michael stopped, looking at him. "For today?" "For everything," Nathan said. "For staying, for working, for not giving up even when I made it clear you weren't welcome." Michael fell silent, clearly moved. "I don't deserve your thanks," he said finally. "Maybe not," Nathan agreed, "but I'm giving it anyway, because you taught me something important these past few years." "What?" "That people can change. That real regret shows in actions, not words, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but means choosing not to let the past poison the future." Michael had to turn his face away, wiping away falling tears. "I'll never be the father I should have been," he said, his voice broken. "I lost that chance forever." "No," Nathan said. "You'll never be the father I needed when I was a child. But you can be something different now. Not a traditional father, but someone who's trying. And that is something." It was the closest to forgiveness Nathan could offer, and for Michael, it was more than he ever expected. The years continued. The property became nationally known. Reports, documentaries, even book proposals about Nathan's story arrived regularly. He refused most. He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want his story exploited. But he agreed to do some interviews, participate in some projects, always with the goal of promoting environmental conservation and awareness about child abandonment. Buddy lived until he was 22 years old, a respectable age for a bear. When he finally passed, it was in peace, lying in the sun near the cabin, with Nathan by his side. Nathan cried as he hadn't cried since he was a child. Buddy had been more than a pet. He had been his savior, his protector, his family when he had no one else. They buried Buddy in a special part of the property under a large tree. Nathan carved a wooden plaque. "Buddy, family isn't defined by blood, but by choice. Thank you for choosing me when I had no one. 2008-2030. Michael stood by his side during the burial, saying nothing, just present. Life went on, as it always does. Nathan was 26 years old now. The property was prosperous. He had a family, even if not traditional. He had friends. He had purpose. One afternoon, he was sitting on the porch of the main cabin when Michael approached. "May I sit?" he asked. Nathan nodded. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun begin to set over the mountain. "I wanted to say something," Michael began hesitantly. "Something I should have said a long time ago." Nathan waited. "I'm proud of you," Michael said, his voice full of emotion. "Of the man you've become, of what you've built. And I know I have no right to be proud because I wasn't the one who did it. It was you alone, but still I am." Nathan felt something tighten in his chest. "Thank you," he said softly. "And I wanted you to know," Michael continued, "that the biggest regret of my life isn't leaving, it's not coming back, it's not fighting, it's choosing cowardice over you, because you always deserved more. You always deserved everything." For the first time since Michael returned, Nathan felt the last piece of ice around his heart melt. "I know," he said, "and I accept your regret. It doesn't mean we forget what happened. It doesn't mean things go back to how they could have been. But it means we can move forward, together. Not as father and son in the traditional sense, but as two people who share history and are trying to be better." Michael nodded, unable to speak. They sat there as the sun went down, painting the sky orange and purple. It wasn't a perfect ending. There was no way to erase the years of pain, of abandonment, of loneliness, but it was a beginning of something new, built on honesty, hard work, and the daily choice to try. The property continued growing. Nathan expanded into educational programs for at-risk children, offering scholarships so they could experience life in the mountains, learn about nature, about resilience, about the fact that the past doesn't define the future. Josh and Melissa became integral parts of the business, helping manage, bringing new ideas, connecting Nathan with opportunities he never would have found alone. Susan became like a mother to Nathan, not replacing the one he lost, but filling a space that was empty. She cooked for him during visits, listened to his worries, offered advice when asked. Mrs. Wilson, now almost 80 years old, still visited, though less frequently. She saw Nathan as the grandson she never had, and he saw her as the grandmother who saved him when he needed it most. The surrounding community prospered too. The tourism brought by Nathan's property injected new life into the village. Small businesses emerged, inns, restaurants, craft stores. People who once lived in hardship now had opportunities, and it all started with an abandoned boy and an injured bear cub. Nathan, now 28 years old, often reflected on his journey, on how the worst thing that happened to him, being abandoned, eventually led to the best things in his life. He didn't romanticize suffering. He didn't say that everything happens for a reason, or other empty phrases that minimized real pain. What he said was that, even in the worst circumstances, there is always a choice. The choice to give up or to continue, to become bitter or to grow, to let the past control the present, or to use the past to build a better future. He thought about all the children who visited the property, coming from difficult situations. He saw in their eyes the same pain he had felt, and he tried to show, not through inspiring words, but through his own existence, that it was possible to survive. It was possible to thrive. It was possible to transform abandonment into purpose. One of the things Nathan did, which became a central part of the property, was to create a mentorship program. At-risk youth, especially those who had suffered abandonment or neglect, could spend time there, learning about survival, nature, construction, sustainable farming. He saw this as a way to give what he never had: support, guidance, the message that they were not alone. Many of these young people came back years later to thank him, to tell how that time in the mountains changed their lives. Some even returned as volunteers, wanting to pass on what they had received. Michael worked in the program too, and it was interesting for Nathan to observe how his father, who had failed so spectacularly with him, managed to connect with these children, perhaps because he intimately knew the weight of failure. Perhaps because he didn't try to be perfect with them, just present. It didn't justify what Michael did. It would never justify it. But it showed that even imperfect people, people who had made terrible mistakes, could still do some good in the world. The property became known not only for Nathan and Buddy's story, but for the social impact it had. There were academic papers written about the mentorship program, about the positive effects of connecting with nature on traumatized children. Nathan was invited to speak at conferences, at schools, at events about conservation and social assistance. He accepted some invitations, always careful not to stay away from the property for too long, as it was his home and his life. At one of these talks, someone from the audience asked, "Have you ever wished your life had been different? That your father hadn't abandoned you?" Nathan thought carefully before answering. "Yes and no," he said honestly. "Yes, because no child should go through what I went through. The loneliness, the fear, the hunger, that was real and it was horrible. I don't wish that on anyone. But no, because everything I am today, everything I built, came from that experience. And if I could go back and change it, I would be a completely different person. Maybe better in some ways, maybe worse in others. I don't know. What I do know is that I can't change the past. I can only choose what to do with it." The answer touched many people in the audience because it was honest. It wasn't a clean narrative of everything happened for a reason. It was the complicated truth that trauma is trauma, but what we do with it defines us. Back at the property, life continued at its own pace. The seasons changed. Hot summers gave way to golden autumns, which turned into snowy winters, which melted into springs full of life. Nathan now had a team of 6 people working regularly at the property. Michael was officially the maintenance and construction manager. There were 2 trail guides, a cook for the visitors who stayed over, and 2 people who managed the mentorship program. It was a small business, but it was sustainable and impactful. Nathan, at 29, began thinking about his future differently. Not just about the property, but about his personal life. He had spent so much time building, surviving, healing, that he never stopped to think about romantic relationships, about maybe starting his own family. That's when he met Emily. She was a biologist conducting a study on the local wildlife. She came to the property asking for permission to conduct research in the area, and Nathan was immediately impressed by her passion for nature, by the respect she showed for the animals. Emily was a few years older, 32, and there was something about her that caught Nathan's attention from the start. It wasn't just her beauty. Though she was pretty with her brown hair always in a ponytail and intelligent green eyes, it was the way she moved through the forest, as if she belonged there, as if she understood that humans were just visitors in that space. They started spending time together during her research. Nathan showed her the best places to observe animals, shared his knowledge about the behavioral patterns he had observed over the years. Emily, in turn, explained scientific aspects that Nathan had never considered, gave scientific names to the plants he knew only by their common names. It was a slow, gradual connection. There was no dramatic moment where Nathan realized he was falling in love. It was more like waking up one day and realizing she was in all his thoughts, that her smile made his day better, that he eagerly awaited the times they would work together. Emily felt the same. And it was she who made the first move one evening after a long day of fieldwork. "Nathan," she said as they watched the sunset from the cabin porch, "I like you a lot. And before I leave at the end of my research, I needed to say that." Nathan felt his heart speed up. "I like you too," he admitted. "But I don't know how this works. Relationships, I've never had one." Emily smiled gently. "We don't always know. Let's figure it out together." That's how it began, without drama, without complications, just 2 people figuring out how to navigate new and scary feelings. When Emily's research ended, she didn't leave. Not completely. She started dividing her time between the university where she worked and the property, and the more time she spent there, the more she realized it was where she wanted to be. A year later, she moved permanently. She brought her research with her, turning part of the property into a conservation study center. It was a perfect addition: education, tourism, and now science, all coexisting in harmony. Nathan's family was happy for him. Josh and Melissa adored Emily. Susan treated her like a daughter. Even Michael, always cautious not to intrude on Nathan's life, seemed genuinely pleased to see his son find happiness. Mrs. Wilson, during one of her visits, pulled Nathan aside. "She's perfect for you," the lady said. "But more importantly, you are perfect for you now. You've grown, healed, built. And now you're ready to let someone completely into your life." "I'm afraid," Nathan confessed, "that something will go wrong, that I won't be good enough at this." "Everyone is afraid," Mrs. Wilson said wisely. "Love is a risk. But you've been through much worse and survived. You'll manage this too." And she was right. Nathan and Emily built a relationship based on mutual respect, admiration, and the deep understanding that comes from sharing fundamental values. They argued, of course. They had disagreements, but they always worked together to resolve them. It was 2 years after they met that Nathan asked Emily to marry him. It was nothing elaborate. It was during a hike through the forest, at the exact spot where he had found Buddy years earlier. "This place," Nathan said, "is where my life changed, where I found family for the first time, and now I want it to be where I promise to spend the rest of my life with you. Emily, will you marry me?" Emily had tears in her eyes when she said yes. The wedding was small, held at the property. Only close family and intimate friends. Michael was there, not as the groom's father, but as a guest, respecting the space Nathan had established. It was Josh who handed over the rings, Melissa who gave the emotional speech about brotherhood and love. Mrs. Wilson cried throughout the entire ceremony. For her, it was seeing the boy she had found so many years ago, scared and alone, now a complete man, surrounded by love, having built a life that once seemed impossible. Married life brought new challenges and joys. Emily wanted children, and Nathan, after much reflection and some difficult conversations with therapists, yes, he eventually started therapy, realizing that even with all his growth, there were things he needed to process with professional help, decided he wanted them too. "But I'm afraid of being like him," Nathan confessed to Emily one night, "of abandoning, of failing." "You won't," Emily said with certainty, "because you know the pain. You know what not to do, and most importantly, you choose every day to be different. That's what matters." They had a daughter. They named her Emma, and when Nathan held that tiny baby for the first time, he felt a love so intense, so overwhelming, that he couldn't imagine how anyone could choose to leave that behind. It was in that moment that he finally fully understood the magnitude of his father's failure, because looking at Emma, he knew there was no circumstance, no fear, no difficulty that would make him abandon her. But also, strangely, it was the moment he finally managed to forgive Michael completely, because he realized his father wasn't a monster. He was just a deeply broken man, unable to be what he should have been. And while that didn't justify his actions, it explained them. And explanation sometimes is the first step toward real forgiveness. Nathan sought out Michael a few days later. "I want you to meet your granddaughter," he said. Michael was in shock. You're sure?" "I am," Nathan said. "But on one condition. You will be a present grandfather. You won't fail her like you failed me. If at any point I think you're not being what she needs, you're out. Understood?" "Understood," Michael said, tears falling. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance." And to Michael's credit, he was a wonderful grandfather. He didn't try to overstep boundaries. He didn't try to act as if there was no history. But he was there. He played with Emma, told her stories, helped when Nathan and Emily needed it. It was as if all the fatherhood he had failed to give Nathan, he tried to make up for by being the best grandfather possible to Emma. It didn't erase the past, but it created something new. The years kept passing. Nathan was now 35. The property was nationally recognized as an example of sustainability, conservation, and social impact. The mentorship program had helped hundreds of young people. Emily's research center had published important studies on the local wildlife. Emma was 5 years old, an energetic girl who loved exploring the forest with her father, who had a natural talent for making friends with animals, and who seemed to have inherited the best of Nathan and Emily. Mrs. Wilson passed away at 86 in peace, surrounded by those she loved. Nathan was by her side in her final moments, holding her hand. "You saved my life," he told her. "When I had no one, you showed up." "No," Mrs. Wilson whispered, a faint smile on her face. "You saved your own life. I just gave a little help." Her funeral was a celebration of a life well lived. Nathan spoke about how she was the first person to show that the world still had kindness, that there were people who cared without wanting anything in return. Her death was hard for Nathan. It was a reminder that nothing lasts forever, that the people we love eventually leave us. But unlike his father's abandonment, Mrs. Wilson's departure was natural, expected, and left only love and gratitude in its wake. Michael was 63 now. The hard work of the last years had taken its toll. He was slower, more tired. Nathan began to insist that he take it easier, that he rest more. "I don't deserve rest," Michael would always say. "Maybe not," Nathan would reply. "But I'm saying you can. You've worked enough, proved enough." It was hard for Michael to accept that. His penance had become his identity. Without constant work, without the daily proof of remorse, he didn't know who he was. Nathan and he had a long talk about it. "You don't need to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself," Nathan said. "You made a terrible mistake, but you spent 15 years trying to be better. At some point, you need to allow yourself to live, not just exist in penance." "How do I do that?" Michael asked, genuinely lost. "How do I just stop?" "Start small," Nathan suggested. "Spend more time with Emma, not as a form of work or compensation, but just because she's your granddaughter and you can enjoy that. Read, rest, live." It was a slow process. Michael still worked, but less. He spent more time with Emma, teaching her about plants, about building, about the things he knew. And in those moments, Nathan saw something he'd never seen before. His father at peace. It wasn't a complete peace. Michael would always carry the guilt of what he did. But it was a possible peace, the peace of someone who had accepted his past and was making the best of the present. The property continued to thrive. Nathan, now almost 40, had become a sort of public figure in the area of conservation and social assistance. He used his platform wisely, always focusing not on himself, but on the causes that mattered. He and Emily had a second child, a boy they named Ethan. The main cabin was expanded again to accommodate the growing family. It was no longer that cold, empty place where Nathan woke up alone at 7 years old. It was a home full of life, love, laughter. One afternoon, Nathan was sitting where Buddy was buried. Emma, now 8 years old, sat beside him. "Daddy," she said, "do you get sad when you think about Buddy?" "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. "But more than sad, I feel grateful. Buddy saved me. Not just physically, but he gave me a reason to keep going when I might have given up." "Were you going to give up?" Emma asked, her big eyes worried. Nathan thought about how to answer honestly without scaring her. "When I was little, sometimes I wanted to. It was very hard, very lonely. But then Buddy appeared and I wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference." "I'll never let you be alone," Emma declared with the absolute conviction that only children have. Nathan hugged his daughter, feeling tears in his eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. But you know what's amazing? I'm not alone now. I have you, your brother, your mum, a whole family. So even on the hard days, I know I'm not alone." "Is that because of Buddy?" Emma asked. "Because he taught you about family?" "In part," Nathan said. "Buddy taught me that family doesn't have to be what we're born with. It can be what we choose. And I choose you all every day." That conversation stayed with Nathan. That conversation. He thought about how his definition of family had evolved over the years. It started with Buddy. It expanded to include Mrs. Wilson, then Josh and Melissa, Emily, the children, and yes, in a way, even Michael. It wasn't a traditional family. It had cracks, it had difficult stories. But it was real, it was chosen, and it was strong. Nathan, at 42, published a book. It wasn't something he had planned to do, but after years of requests, he finally gave in. The book wasn't just about his story, but about the concepts of resilience, forgiveness, chosen family, and environmental conservation. The title was Abandoned Not Defeated, A Story of Survival and Resilience. The book was a moderate success. It wasn't a worldwide bestseller, but it reached the people it needed to reach. Nathan received letters from children who had experienced abandonment, from regretful parents trying to reconnect with their children, from people struggling to forgive. He personally responded to every letter. It was exhausting, but he felt it was important. If his story could help even one person, it was worth the effort. One letter in particular touched him deeply. It was from a man who had abandoned his son years ago and was trying to reconnect. "Your story gave me hope," the man wrote, "but it also showed me the magnitude of what I did. I don't know if my son will give me the chance you gave your father. But your story taught me that I need to try. Not for me, but for him. I need to at least give him the opportunity to decide." Nathan replied, encouraging the man to be honest, humble, and prepared for any response. "What matters isn't forgiveness," he wrote. "It's giving your son the power to choose. You took that choice away when you left. Now you need to give it back." The property, now over 30 years since Nathan started rebuilding it, was practically its own village. There were 15 permanent cabins, a full educational center, Emily's research center, sustainable farming areas, and the main house where the family lived. It employed 23 people full-time and was one of the biggest tourist attractions in the region. But Nathan was always careful not to let it become too commercial, something that would lose its essence. Michael was 70 years old. His health was declining. He had heart problems. His mobility was limited. But he still insisted on doing small jobs, on making himself useful. One night, Nathan found him sitting alone, looking at the stars. "Can I join you?" Nathan asked. "Of course," Michael said. They sat in silence for a while, just watching the sky. "I've been thinking," Michael finally said, "about everything. About life. About my choices. And I wanted to say something." Nathan waited. "Thank you," Michael said simply, "for giving me a chance, for not hating me forever, for letting me know my grandchildren, for giving me the opportunity to be something better than the man who abandoned you." "You're still that man," Nathan said honestly. "The past doesn't disappear, but you're also more than that now. You're someone who recognized his mistake, who tried to do better, who spent half his life trying to prove real remorse. Is it enough?" "It's not my decision," Nathan said. "Every person you hurt needs to decide if it's enough for them. For me, it doesn't erase what happened. It never will. But it creates something new alongside it. And that is something." Michael nodded, silent tears falling. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not," Nathan agreed. "But I choose to give you this chance anyway. Not for you, for me, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying anger." It was one of the last deep conversations they had. 3 months later, Michael had a heart attack. It wasn't immediately fatal, but it made it clear his time was limited. In the hospital, with Josh, Melissa, Susan, and Nathan around his bed, Michael spoke his last words. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at each of them, "for all the ways I failed you. Nathan," he turned to his eldest son, "thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to try to be better." Michael Miller passed away at 70 years old. His funeral was simple, attended mainly by family and those who worked on the property and had learned to respect him over the last 15 years of his life. Nathan did not cry at the funeral. Not for lack of feeling, but because he had processed so much over the years that there were no new tears left to shed. What he felt was a strange mix of relief, sadness, and closure. "Are you okay?" Emily asked afterward. "I am," Nathan said, and it was true. "It's strange. Part of me feels the loss, but another part feels that maybe now we can all move forward completely, without the shadow of the past always present." Emma, now 11 years old, had questions. "Daddy, did you forgive Grandpa?" Nathan thought carefully. "Yes and no," he said honestly. "I forgave in the sense that I chose not to let what he did control my life. I forgave in the sense of giving him the chance to try to be better. But I didn't forget, and I will always carry the scars of what happened." Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or saying everything is okay. It means choosing to move forward despite it all. "That makes sense," Emma said. "Like when someone hurts you at school. You can forgive them, but you don't have to be best friends with that person again." "Exactly," Nathan said, impressed by his daughter's wisdom. "Exactly that." Life went on, as it always does. The property grew even larger. Nathan was now 45. Emma was 14. Ethan was 7. Josh and Melissa, now established adults, had their own lives but still visited regularly and helped manage aspects of the business. Nathan often reflected on his journey, from an abandoned boy to a man who built a legacy, from a lonely child with only a bear as company to a family man surrounded by love. It wasn't a story with a perfectly happy ending, Because real life doesn't work that way. There were scars, there were hard days, there were moments when the past still hurt. But it was a story of resilience, of choice, of proving that what happens to us doesn't completely define who we become, that abandoned doesn't mean defeated, that family can be created, not just born into, that forgiveness is possible, even when it seems impossible. End of story. And you, what did you think of this journey? Tell us in the comments what touched you most in this story and where you're watching from. What would you have done in Nathan's place? Would you have been able to forgive like he did? We would love to read your honest opinion. Thank you so much for your company up to here. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories we've prepared for you.